I still don't see Craig, but if you want, I can start with the meeting
Why don't you do that? Yes.
All right.
Will.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us at one of our virtual committee meetings, or maybe just the first time in a long time, we're happy to have you here. But you'll notice a couple of things about the Zoom that will help us make for an orderly meeting. So first thing you'll notice is that you're currently muted, and you will remain muted throughout the duration of the meeting, except for if one of our committee co-chairs, Craig or Chuck, call on you. The only folks who will be unmuted at any given time and able to unmute will be the co-chairs and our presenters as we move through the agenda. Following each presentation, as we go down the agenda, we will ask for members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon on your screen and pressing the raise hand button. It's not the wave or the thumbs up. Those will go back down and disappear. If you press the raise hand button twice, your hand will go back down as well. So only press it once. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to unmute or to raise your hand, and then *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of our co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support, not to ask questions of any of the participants or the presenters or the co-chairs. They will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen to get our attention. If you're having problems, chat me. I'm here to support. And with that, I see Craig is here and Chuck is here, and we can get going as soon as they're ready.
Thanks, Will. I'd like to welcome everyone to the May meeting of the Transportation Committee of Community Board 8. I'm Chuck Warren, co-chair of the committee, and Craig Lader, my co-chair, is here also. And I know for our first item on the agenda, the presentation by Council Member Keith Powers about the adverse effects of scaffolding on our streetscape, and there's a proposed package of legislation to address the proliferation of sidewalk sheds on our streets. And it's a package of 9 bills, a number of which have been introduced by Council Member Powers and some from other council members, and we're pleased to have Hayden Spitz from Boston here, and we welcome you, Hayden, who has had experience in using drones to do some of the work that we put up sheds to do. So we're anxious to hear, and Sherry Weiner kindly arranged to have Hayden make an appearance here, and we appreciate her help in this effort. There's Council Member Powers. Welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry I'm doing this from the street. I'm trying to do multiple events tonight, and wanted to make sure I could be here with you guys. And I was trying to actually find some scaffolding, ironically enough, to give me some cover, but I'm here and I'm good. First of all, thank you guys for taking this on tonight and putting us on the agenda. We are very excited working with the Manhattan Borough presidents and colleagues to have this package we introduced about a couple of weeks back, a little bit over a month ago, which any New Yorker, I think, can relate to, which is the issue of too much scaffolding being up in our neighborhoods and throughout the city. Feels like an extremely uniquely New York City issue. And if you, if you look at the numbers and you look at how much we have, it's staggering. I think the borough president cited this. You could line up all the scaffolding here in New York City, and it would stretch to Montreal. So we are talking about a whole lot. And I think for many of us, see a lot of issues that arise when you put it up. A lot of folks who are in buildings where it's a tremendous cost to them to put it up and to kind of continuously go through the local law 11 process. But also, just far too many that have been up for too long. Some that go back to, I think, 2006 or longer. And so I have actually for a long time been thinking about this issue as we think about small businesses that are getting buried underneath it and losing much needed revenue and foot traffic because of it. The just sort of general unsightliness and unsafety issues that kind of arise underneath it. They can bring up quality of life issues as well, of course. And it feels to me like a failure of bureaucracy in government here to continue to have the scaffolding all up, and not giving anybody the ability to enjoy their city, and just make it a city of all shade and scaffolding and sidewalk sheds. So I was excited with the borough president. We actually did a report announcement first, and then we did a series of bills with Councilmember Baccio, Abreu, and Marte. And I think now Councilmember Menon and others have also put some bills in as well. And the report and the bills identify a whole number of ways that we can tackle this problem. But we talk about everything from how to maybe come up with a program for the buildings that can't take down the scaffolding, or can't afford rather to do the work to take the scaffolding down. We talk about city-owned properties, which are really bad offenders when we talk about how long they've been up. We talk about the use of drones. I have a bill that talks about the use of drones. We talk about design standards. We talk about lighting underneath them to keep them safe, and a whole lot more. And it's not even necessarily getting to every single issue that we've heard it since. And I can tell you affirmatively that almost every New Yorker I've talked to, whether you are Democrat, Republican, live uptown, downtown, or the other boroughs, hate the unsightliness of scaffolding throughout the city, perhaps except for a rainy day. And so I think there's a lot of excitement about what we're doing, and it comes from people that are in tops and coasts and condos and are constantly facing this kind of question of cost and affording this work. We talk about people like small businesses that are upset when it goes up, and they really lose sight lines to their businesses. I've talked to folks who just are frustrated when government's not working, and they want to see us do better and much more. And so that package of legislation, which we introduced and worked on getting a hearing for, is a kind of an exciting way, I think, to take on a very old New York problem. The one thing I'll mention is safety is always something we deeply care about. We're not getting rid of all the scaffolding. You're still going to have to put it up for safe work. Well, why do new buildings have to have it up so fast and do all the work? Why can't we use drones to do some of the work and inspections? Why can't we make them nicer and mandate better standards than just the green that we see everywhere? Those are questions we've been asking, and our legislation is attempting to answer and to address. And how do we help people that can't afford to do the really, really expensive work to get into a place or in financing or a program to do it? And that's kind of where we are coming from. I'll just give you the bills that we have, a couple quickly. One is 970, which establishes new design requirements to scaffolding, allowing the structures to be painted in many different colors, not just the green, and raising their minimum height to 12 feet. That's a bill that basically, there's some out there you'll see, like the urban umbrella scaffolding, where they look a lot nicer. So why not do that sort of citywide? We also allow some alternatives to be used, like netting and cantilevered sheds. 972 is allowing the city to come in and correct unsafe conditions on facades themselves. It's similar to the HPD's alternative enforcement program in buildings. We have some changes to new buildings, where instead of doing their work in inspections 5 years in, they would be allowed to do them 8 years in, especially for buildings that are using new materials. That is basically saying, new buildings just got approved. Why do we need to immediately have them turn around and start doing new work on them especially when they're using, glass or other materials that are safe and don't need as much inspection? And then we have a pilot program for drones. And then we actually do get complaints about when they go up, like trees and other things on the streetscape that get removed. So we're actually also mandating they do street replacement so that we don't lose a nice tree on our streetscape because of scaffolding going up. We also have a number of other bills that are being introduced by other council members about lighting and safety standards and things like that. And I think we're going to have one soon that creates a kind of an alternative program for helping expedite, or a new program to help expedite things as well. So I think Will has said they're all on your agenda. We love you guys to support it. So certainly want to invite all to come to a hearing when we have it. And if you have any other ideas on this, we always love good ideas from people that are constituents or residents or New Yorkers. So we would love to hear more. We've got a ton already of other ideas people have about how you might solve some of these issues. So it feels like a right down the middle New York issue that would help address a lot of concerns we hear, and certainly would love your guys' support for that.
Thank you, Keith. We appreciate your efforts in this. This is a major problem. And I also want to recognize that Chris Carroll from the Borough President's Office, the Borough President's Policy Director, who's been involved in this, is here also. And I don't know, Chris, if you want to add any general comments at this point.
Thanks, Chuck. I would actually just reiterate everything the Councilmember already said. He's got everything covered. I think the only thing I'd add is that we're super lucky to work with him on all of this. The Borough President obviously has taken this to be one of the things he cares very deeply about. Totally agree with Keith on all of that, and it's been really great working with him on that. So very lucky for that.
I want to say Chris helped put the report together to help drive the ideas, and we were the guys who did the bills. So it was great effort, and we saw a lot of I think reception to the entire idea. So I want to thank the Borough President, Chris, for their work.
Thank you. And now if he would like to have Hayden Spitz tell us about his experiences with drones in doing this kind of checking of buildings and how that's worked in Boston. We always like to see what good things we can get from Boston, except for the Red Sox. But
I won't take that one personally.
That's just a cheap shot from Yankee fan.
Don't expect anything different.
So Hayden, we're thank you for coming on, and we appreciate this. And again, Sherry, efforts in asking you to come, and maybe you can enlighten us as to how things have worked, in Boston when you use drones.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the founder and owner of Boston Drone Productions, and I've been in progress for about 3 years now, doing everything from photography and videography on the ground to 400 feet plus using drones. Used it in tons of different capabilities, from everything from video and services from residential buildings to events, parties, everything like that. But a big part of what I do, like you guys are saying, is inspections. And again, as I'm saying, the inspections, I'm not the one personally doing the inspection. I'm the one handling, getting the videography and photography of the building. So I'm always working with somebody who has to get their property looked at, whether they have a problem with their roof, whether they have a problem with the side of their building, whatever it may be. And then working with their inspectors or contractors to understand what areas they need to visualize and see in a proper way. And then by getting up there, getting 4K quality videos, photos, I'm able to give them a very clear photo and video of what they're seeing. This is really great for multiple reasons. A, this is something that they can keep and use for insurance purposes for later in the future, for not just the owner, but also for the contractors who are working and building this. It allows them to see what's going on in the roof without having to get anybody up there, without any safety concerns. And again, without having to put up scaffolding, which can cost thousands of dollars plus. So it'd take, weeks to go up, stay there for the actual looking at the building, and then come down. As most of the buildings have at least 3 or 4 sides if they're not connected to another building. Being able to get the drone up there, getting very close and visual, you're able to get all the different sides, get very close and updated information of every side of each window, of all the different gutters, what's going on. And so if there was an actual problem and you needed to do the scaffolding later, you could do it on the one side or part of it where you needed to later when the actual work needed to be getting done, but you don't have to do it on every single side, create such a ruckus and have to go all over, which is much better. I've worked with many different inspectors, and everyone has a different quality in what they're looking for, whether it's, are they looking at the gutters? Are they looking at the roof shingles? Are they looking at the chimneys, maybe? And the drone is able to get very high quality visuals of all of those. I do have a small presentation I can share quickly. if it will allow me to.
Sure.
If everyone can see that, this is just quick presentation. Like I said, drones can be used. The ones that I use right now can film up to 5.4K quality, but mostly using 4K, getting very high visuals in video, and then also being able to shoot photos from 20 to 45 megapixels using a small drone. Again, if I use it in my hand, they're this size, as you can see. They're not very big, but they can get through the streets, they can go around the different buildings and get very good quality photos and videos. All the photos are taken and again, immediately saved so that they can be shareable to either the inspectors, to the property managers, to the developers. I've had people who used the photos and videos and sent it to their insurance companies afterwards. Even happily being able to do it for my parents after a storm, we're able to send their photos and videos of their roof to the insurance agents. And because of the video, we're actually able to save up to $11,000, which is a cool thing for a kid to be able to do for their parents, right? The in-person inspections, if an inspector actually wanted to join me, there are ways to connect another display to my controller, so the inspector can actually be looking at it physically while I'm there and actually getting the video in quality. So if there's something that they want to see specifically, I can move in a certain direction, move in a different way to be able to see that in a better focus. And then again, like I said, the saved footage, whether it's they're there or not, all of the footage, all of the photos will get saved for a future date and being able to be used for historical data. Plus, where if you're just doing scaffolding and you're having somebody go up and check, it's not always 100% sure that you're going to be getting video and photo that's going to be used in that high quality. And then just to show, this is a few examples of some work that I did for a residential partner and out in the suburbs. Again, being able to shoot very closely. They were looking to see if they had an issue on the outside of their chimney. That was the issue that they were having. So again, being able to get very high quality photos of their gutters, of the siding, and their inspector looked at those and was able to find that there was nothing wrong with these sections. So it had to be something internal.
Hayden, let me ask you a question on this. Go back to the last slide. You see the one on the right there where it shows the bricks?
Yes.
We have local law 11 here, where you have to inspect your brickwork and the mortar that's in between it to make sure that things are not crumbly and where something might fall out and hit, injure someone on the ground or worse. Right. And that's what a lot of the scaffolding is for. And, there's scaffolding for new construction, obviously, but for local law 11 work, because there's something always happening with that. And so I guess the question I would have, and you can get a picture of that, but a lot of times people up on the scaffolding, they'll take some samples or, of the mortar in between the bricks and stuff. And can you get a close enough look from what the drone and the camera that you have, that you could actually look at the mortar in between the bricks that are showing on, the red bricks that are showing on this right side, and they're on the chimney in the left one. But and that, is that good enough to do that?
Yes. I mean, even evidently in these photos, you can see the inside and how the curves go around the bricks on each of these photos. And again, this is a little even further away. I could even get closer with the drone if I really needed to. And this was enough for the contractor to give a full analysis and say for sure. And again, took many photos. This was just the highlight.
Yeah, right. And the other thing is, you mentioned 400 feet. We have a lot of high-rise buildings that are above that. How high can these things? I mean, how high do they go?
Yes. So with drones, depending on the different areas and different airspaces, drones usually tend to hit the maximum of 400 feet before needing a FAA allowance to go higher than that. There's also different focuses on if you're closer to buildings, you can go higher when you're next to buildings, again, with the FAA allowances. And so if you're doing an inspection for something higher, you're going to have to go through the FAA to get that. Even in New York, again, you have the law So you're still going to be putting in your safety requirements. You're going to be talking with the FAA through the link system, which is what they use to talk to the FAA to give them a full scale report of this is why I'm flying. This is how high I need to go. This is the purpose that I'm doing it. This is my safety plan. If the battery dynamo is going to fall, what am I going to do? How am I blocking off the area? What am I doing in all of these situations? So there's a lot to go into it. It's not just doing the inspection, because as a photographer, videographer, inspector, and all of these extras, first comes is the drone aspect. And the first thing about droning is safety. If it's not going to be safe, you can't do it. And so that's again based on weather, based on what the situation is around you. So in New York, obviously there's a lot to be focused on and a lot of things going on at all times. So having a plan is going to be the first part of doing that. And that's something that you work on with the FAA to go through. And again, this is something that they do historically as every allowance they get. They look at that, say, okay, there's no issues, and continue to build on that in those laws to create sound laws that are not going to be affected in the future. So yes, they can go higher than 400. They can go a lot higher than 400 feet. But the 0 to 400 feet is saying what the normal allowance is before needing.
There are some limitations on drones, how high they can fly in New York City, because we're close to the airports and stuff like that, and you don't want to, get any situations like that. LaGuardia Airport is not too far from where I'm sitting right now.
Right. And the same thing goes for, I've done a ton of buildings in the Seaport. If anybody knows the Boston area, the Seaport is literally across from Logan Airport. So I am constantly doing reports for them, making sure I know all the safety protocols to go into that, to make sure that I know exactly where I'm going to fly, how I'm going to fly, and that it's not going to bother any flights, but also making sure that, again, helicopters also fly low. You have tons of helipads. So there's a ton of more safety that goes into this, and every single trained pilot that has their Part 107 license knows all of this, and should be verified. And that's a borderline start part.
Yeah.
And then again, as I was saying, and then here's in the city. This is in the Back Bay. Again, this is, I would say, a little closer to New York, the way New York works, where it's a lot more compact. The buildings are a lot closer. Again, we have a lot of brick buildings, brownstones that need inspection too. And so again, getting close, getting focused on those gutters, checking the roofing, checking all different angles and those different sides, and being careful on all of that. And so absolutely, I think it is a phenomenal idea to use drones instead of the scaffolding, because it's quicker, it costs way less. You get somebody skilled and understanding. You get these photos and videos for a long time for the inspectors and for historical data and for the inspections, like I said. And yeah, it's great. It's been a great part of my business, and it helps the people who own the buildings and who are working on the buildings a lot. So I'm proud to have it.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, are there any members of the public that would like to ask any questions about any of this? And I know, I think we have Haley Brundage from Council Member Powers' office. I think Council Member may have had to leave, but and Haley might be able to answer any questions on behalf of the council member, right? I'll put you on the spot, Haley. And so are there any questions from the public first?
You have a hand up from somebody named Jamak.
Yes. Who can we, if someone will identify themselves, why don't we unmute Jamak, whoever, and they can introduce themselves. So I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah, look for a prompt on your screen and then just give us your name as you start your remarks. All right, you're unmuted. You should be able to speak.
Hello.
Check to make sure whatever microphone you're using is not muted. But we do also have a hand up from Dylan Geronimo Kennedy. So
Right.
if
Yeah.
We'll
Why
go-
don't we go to Dylan and while we're waiting for if we can. Okay,
Hi,
Dylan.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
yes.
So I realize that the congressman's no longer here, or not the council member, Keith Powers, is no longer here, but hopefully the representative will be able to answer these questions. I first off want to say that I love these ideas. I think each and every one of these would improve my city, and it would help businesses and do all the goals as described. However, these sound like a lot of kind of clever ways of getting around the problem, and I'm just curious, and I don't know the answer to this. What makes other cities different? Because I'm sure some cities are doing a drone here and there, or allowances for some new buildings. But it seems like the magnitude of difference between New York and other cities is pretty dramatic when it comes to scaffolding. I used to live in Chicago for a few years, and it didn't seem like there was a huge safety impact either. So I was just wondering if you could speak to kind of a macro level. Why does New York have so much more scaffolding? I'm assuming it's some combination of more inspections and more expensive inspections. And then two, does New York actually get safety benefits out of this compared with other cities that have less scaffolding? Thank
Why don't we
you.
unmute Haley so she can answer any questions?
Yeah, and Chris is also unmuted as an expert on this as well.
Right.
Hey,
Yeah, Chris.
everyone.
Chris, feel free to chime in also, Chris.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna throw it to Chris because he's definitely the expert on this. But I think you're definitely right that New York is different in their approach to scaffolding. But Chris, definitely take it away.
Thanks, Haley. And yeah, I love the question, and it's a good point. The first thing I'll say to like the point that there are lots of small, neat little ways of getting around small problems. It's totally fair, and it's why the borough president and the council member actually took a very broad approach to this problem. There is no silver bullet. And the first foremost thing here is that sidewalk sheds are there for a public safety reason. Scaffolding is there to protect workers. These are things that are good. The problem is that we're trying to figure out ways to make the facade work that is requiring those safety precautions to be easier to get done. The faster facade work gets done, the faster sheds come down, the faster scaffolding isn't needed anymore. And so all these different strategies are very much designed that if we did each and every one of them, we'd really start seeing a very appreciable difference in the way in which we are all experiencing sidewalk sheds on the street. We'd be combining ways for facade work to get done faster, combining ways for design to make it easier to navigate the sidewalk. We'd be adding ways in which we can be supporting businesses as well as building owners to get work done. And all these pieces together add up to a much larger whole than their individual parts. The question about what makes New York City different is very good. And it has to do with the nature of that public safety concern and history in New York City. Combination of there being a history where pedestrians have been struck by falling debris, and generally speaking, when you're hit by something falling out of a building, particularly buildings where this law, local law 11, applies, those are buildings over 6 stories, the outcomes are not good. And so the original law at the state level and then adding regulation throughout the city level has been in an effort to keep pedestrians safe. The other thing I'd have to say, and for anyone here with experience with organized labor, among the most dangerous jobs in the city have to do with people working on facade. If you look at construction deaths in New York City, I would say at least half, if not more, every year, or someone falling in association with a scaffolding issue. So as a result, there's a lot of regulation about, one, when it's required, and two, what it looks like. And so It's why we've really been focusing, instead of just saying, let's get rid of sidewalk shades, let's not have it anymore. Let's get rid of scaffolding, let's not have it anymore. It is instead how to make it so the work gets done as quickly as possible. And when it is required, make it so it's least impactful on the streetscape as possible.
And I think there's more construction, Dylan, in New York over. I mean, New York's a huge place, but there's always construction going on, even though in a place like Chicago there is too. But I think not to the extent there is here in New York. There's just so much construction, and not just putting up new buildings, but people renovating buildings. I mean, we see it all the time in our community board when people are coming where they bought some kind of a townhouse and they're now renovating it. And one of the scaffoldings that was up for many years in our area was someone who was actually doing that work, and the scaffolding was up there for years. And so, I mean, there are a whole bunch of things, but I think Chris stated it well. I mean, in the local law 11, because people were actually killed from stuff falling off buildings, and that spurred local law 11. And that's a constant thing that every building above a certain height has to go through. And they're on these cycles. And so there's always some of that going on at all times. And that again is why you see all these scaffolding.
I would also add just the point about it being for specific types of buildings. Local law 11 only applies to a building that's over 6 stories. And in New York City, we are particularly dense in buildings over 6 stories. Right. And every city has those, but I think that the sheer number of buildings is pretty extensive. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Let's go to Marty Edelman now. I can see.
Marty, look for a prompt to unmute.
Yeah, you're on, Marty. Yeah, you can
yes,
talk.
For many years, my co-op used scaffolding, and about 3 years ago, I saw at the trade show, the expo, boom cranes. And at first they said, oh, it's going to be too expensive. Well, I tell you, the scaffolding that we had used was up for 2 to 3 weeks. The boom crane did the same job in 2 days. So whenever it's possible to me to use a boom crane over there, they could get at the job and get it done much quicker. And by doing it, eliminate the efforts and the problems with scaffolding.
How tall is your building, Marty?
13 stories.
Okay, I guess as you get taller, it may be harder.
No, I don't think you have boom cranes that go up 40 stories. But, like you said, there's many that are 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 stories. And they have boom cranes that are capable of doing this. So it's not for everyone, but it will make a significant dent in the problems that we have with scaffolding.
Well, let's try JMAC again if we can't.
Yeah,
get
they said that they
JMAC.
were on the phone earlier, so they said they should be ready. So look for a prompt on your screen, JMAC, and just identify yourself.
Right. Okay.
Well, we still can't hear you. So maybe log out and log back in and raise your hand again.
Yes, well, why don't we go to the board? We have a number of board members who want to be heard on this. And Peter Borak, I think, had raised his hand. How about Peter?
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for the great presentations. I had 2 specific questions for Councilmember Powers. And so I guess his staff member is on the spot. One is my parents are on 77th and 3rd. And during COVID, they're on the 2nd floor and they had scaffolding up for almost 2 years and it was miserable. And across the street, the scaffolding had mesh. The wall was a mesh wall, which you can see through. But in their apartment, it was the solid wall, if you have any idea what I'm talking about, and they couldn't see through. And the difference in quality of life for someone on the 2nd floor that can't see out their window versus can, for the minimal cost difference for the mesh walling on the scaffolding is tremendous. And so I'm curious if you considered or would consider some sort of proposal to require that to the extent feasible. That's question 1. I have a second question. I'd like to hear your answer to that.
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. I know you guys all have the links to all of our bills. If you wanted to look at Intro 970, that one covers, it's very lengthy, so there's a lot in there, but it's really focused on design requirements for sidewalk sheds, and it does sort of make a point to sort of switch to alternative forms of scaffolding, like the mesh that you're talking about and the netting that does make folks' quality of life a little bit better wherever it's possible. So that's definitely incorporated into that bill. If you have like specific questions about that too, we're happy to look at it. But yeah, it's definitely like one of our priorities to be able to look to alternative forms of scaffolding that are less horrible to daily life. Chris, I don't know if you want to add something.
Nothing, and that's exactly right.
All right, thanks. I'll withhold the second question. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Michelle Birnbaum, I believe, is next. Michelle.
Thank you, Chuck. Yeah, I actually requested that net on the scaffolding for our building to make sure that went up, because it does make a very big difference in the quality of life. I have a couple of comments and a question. I'm going to start with the last, actually. Does the drone that you're speaking about, do you have an infrared capability? Because that's one of the things, infrared, no matter how you get up to the brickwork or wherever you want to go on whatever floor, whether you're using the scaffolding or a drop or whatever, the infrared capability is what helps you to know how the mortar is doing. So does your drone, Hayden, have such a capability?
Yeah, I had to unmute Hayden there. Well, there we go.
That is a great question. And this one that I showed personally does not, but there are many versions that do, and ones that I have and others have as well. Yes, there are thermals, and again, it used in tons of capabilities, and the capabilities are just getting better and better in all with new drones coming out. I know the Mavic 3 Enterprise does, which is one of the staples right now. And again, thermal is being used in all cases and scenarios, not even just inspections, but in helping find missing people, lost dogs, used by a lot of park rangers, finding people in all cases and scenarios, in water, whatnot. So thermal has been a huge usage in a lot of construction and usage. So yes.
Okay, great. Because that would make that makes a tremendous difference, because, well, obviously looking at the mortar from the outside, as opposed to taking a sample, no matter how close you can get with a drone without infrared, it would be very difficult to have an accurate accounting of what was going on. The other thing, I have a couple of more things, if you don't mind. Introduction 970, I have concern about that, because you're talking about painting scaffolds in different colors, or giving whoever the option to do that. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So I would not be enthusiastic about a bill that would allow people to make their own personal decorative statement on any of these scaffolds. The fact that they're all uniform, pretty much uniform anyway, in that color green, to me, that's a benefit. That's a plus. I would not want to see them varied on block to block. I think you're really venturing into a visual blight by doing that. I also have a concern about the 12 feet. Now, the 12 feet requirement, if it's over a playground or some kind of a public facility, I understand it full well. If it's an option for an apartment building, that would put you pretty much right in the middle of the window of the second floor. That would be, or even worse, above the second floor, which means that the second floor would be under the scaffold. So I think that's a dangerous way to go. So I would not necessarily be for that. In Intro 972, when you're talking about the city being allowed to step in and correct unsafe conditions for which the property owner would be responsible, Also, a little of concern because we all know that everything the city does would be far more expensive than anything a private owner could contract out. So to have or to require, I don't know if I actually clicked on to try to get into the whole bills, you know, to try to read them, but I couldn't do it from the link. I'll have to go on the website, on the city website to do it. So I don't know how carefully it defines this, but that's of great concern to me. Years ago, when we did a project on 86th Street and we had a whole proposal to redo the sidewalks and granite curbs and streetscapes and all kinds of things, and we met with Scott Stringer over it, and we got our own private estimates of how to do it. And we went down to him and he laughed. And he said, well, you know, if the city does it, it's going to be 4 times that price. And that's, of course, because of whatever criteria and paperwork and insurance, you know, whatever a city has to go through versus an individual owner. So I have a lot of concerns about that one. The last thing, and this is, I think would be of great concern to everybody on this call, is what kind of financing help are you talking about? How does it characterize it? Can you define it? And who's eligible for it and under what circumstances? Because not only is the bridge costly, but as you all know, the cost of repairs, facade repairs, is exorbitant. So could you elaborate on that financial help piece of this?
Yeah, I'll jump in there if that's okay with you, Haley.
Totally.
And Michelle, I very much appreciate, particularly the last question there. It's super important. So that everyone actually has the full thing. And if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to throw into the chat the full report and plan that we wrote. Michelle, the very first piece of this plan is about financing for buildings that are demonstrating some sort of financial hardship. Our hope is that by working with the city and working with the state legislature, we'd be able to create a mechanism that would help deal with the fact that there are times, particularly for some condos and co-ops, for HDFCs, for buildings that are in an affordable housing program, for Mitchell-Lama buildings, et cetera, that a facade repair, particularly one that's major, it can be an extraordinarily difficult thing to pay for, if not impossible. And that sometimes those are the reasons why a sidewalk shed ends up being up for years and years and years, because the work simply can't be financed in some way. So that is part of our approach here. It is certainly an issue that we've heard a lot about, both from building owners and property owners, as well as from the industry. Everyone agrees that is something we need to address. There isn't legislation yet on that, because again, it's actually requires state authority to allow for it. So okay. The idea here is that, ultimately a city agency would be able to manage a low interest loan program. But again, we have to have the state to allow for that to happen. Otherwise, we have to find a third party that wants to do it on their own, which is also in the realm of possibility, but it's all part of, this larger plan. And it's
let me add a comment, which is true of buildings on south of 96th Street, which I think is eminently unfair. The last time we did our local law 11, 5 years ago, we were required to have a safety monitor. Now, it was already being monitored by the contractor, our engineer, our super, like 4 people were monitoring it. Now, this safety person charged $100,000 to monitor this. However, that charge is only due on buildings that are south of 96th Street, which seems grossly unfair, since if you have a 14-story pre-war building north of 96th Street, which you do, that needs work, why don't they need a safety engineer if you're so convinced? I don't mean you, but the powers that be, if they're so convinced that a safety engineer is needed. So I think that's grossly unfair. I'm not sure it's a question you can answer today, but I would sure like it if you would take a look at the fairness of that concept. And my second question and last, and thank you for indulging me, is how far into the future, how far down the road is this financing thing going to be formalized and defined, and who's financially in need, and how far into the future are we looking on that?
Well, honestly, it's one of the reasons why we're here, and I know why the council member was eager to speak with you all. We're in the early stages of advocacy for this entire plan and for the entire legislative package. We absolutely need Community Board 8 as well as every other Manhattan board, and honestly would love every city community board to be weighing in on the need for these types of reforms. So we need City Hall to pay attention. We need DOB to be paying attention. The mayor has been very clear that he's interested in addressing sidewalk sheds and scaffolding and really figuring out what the future there looks like. But it does seem like they're picking and choosing which pieces of that they're particularly interested in. We haven't heard a whole lot of interest about this particular piece, about financing and the challenge there. And so we're really going to have to drum up a lot of support. That's the stage we're in. Because of that, it's hard to really provide any sort of real timeline about when this would happen, because there are a bunch of pieces that need to fall into place. We're really hoping that we can focus on the local municipal level to build the political will and the interest and the desire to do this, get the authority from the state, and then really build it down here. So that'll take time, but I don't really have a timeline I can give you beyond that.
I appreciate that. And can you just check on that $100,000, or this, I shouldn't say the price, because now it's 5 years later, and I would guarantee that requirement will cost twice that amount. But just the inequity of that is troubling to me.
Totally.
So I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much, and good presentations, everybody.
Okay, Lori Boris, I believe, is next. Can we unmute Lori?
Yes, thank you for a fabulous presentation. I just have one question. If you can help me with, what I was going to ask you is, will this cost less? And it obviously will. And you mentioned that in your presentation, but can you give us an idea about how much it would cost if you compare putting up a scaffolding on a building, and how much it would save if you were doing it with a drone?
Yeah. Again, it's going to depend on who's doing it. Everybody's going to have their own price, but just looking at scaffolding, I was actually just looking up the price right now as you were saying that, and it's saying it's about $400 per linear foot to install and remove, plus the $700 a month the builder gets for having the scaffolding there. Giving that price, you're talking about, they're saying a 200-foot long stretch would cost around $25,000, and the builder gets $700 a month in rent for that. For one building in New York, again, it taking maybe not even half an hour to go up and down to get the whole scan, unless you're actually getting very specific photos of what you're not. You're talking about $1,000 maybe, give or take, up or down, to get photos and videos of something that's going to stay there. And again, it can go anywhere from $500 to, $2,500. The prices are not, again, and I'm talking not just generally me, I'm talking about anyone who does this professionally can cost
Right.
that much. But again, remember, you're also getting all these 4K photos and videos for all these purposes, which again, you can send to insurance if anything goes wrong, and you have all of those files stored, which can save multi-$1,000s. So on top of that, it is extremely cost effective to use drones rather than to get the scaffolding up.
Yeah, no, it sounds it. I just think this is wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's orders of magnitude cheaper, Lori.
Right. And again, talking about like what the smaller 6-story house versus, a giant skyscraper, it could also cost different on that part too. But it's again, $25,000 versus that.
Right. The
Right.
costs are astronomical when you get to building of any size with the scaffolding, and it stays up for a long time.
And there's differences between, again, going the thermal route if you're trying to get the thermal quality of that, because you need a specific drone to have that on top of everything, which again, totally reasonable and still going to cost way less than $25,000 to do a building.
Well, I mean, that's not even in the ballpark. I mean, you're talking about costs at 20 times, or more than that.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, again, the drone pilots that are doing this are doing it to, again, make their living, but also to get you everything that you need for you to sustain. They're not trying to break your bank or anything like that, too. Where I don't understand these scaffoldings personally.
Okay, Rebecca Lamort, next. Can we unmute? Oh, she's unmuted. Aha. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you. So I love that we were just talking about dollars and cents and saving money, but in that money saving, I see workers and I see people with jobs. So do we even estimate for job loss that the drone use versus scaffolding and workers going up to survey?
I don't know about anything on the scaffolding aspect, but again, for a drone pilot, you'd have 1 or 2 pilots going up and down to do that. But that's all you would need for the usage of the drone pilots. But there are many, and again, you have all of New York, which can employ multiple and many different businesses. So it's a different business. But if you guys want to talk on the scaffolding, I know nothing on that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if. Yeah, I was going to say maybe Councilmember Powers' office or the Borough President's office.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say on our bill that's specifically on using drones for building inspections, it's a good question, and it's something we're definitely considering. The bill that we have would be a pilot program, and the Department of Buildings would then, study the findings, and report back on what they found. And I think that could be definitely an element of sort of reporting back. It wouldn't be a permanent program at that point. I think there's definitely room for discussion on that as well.
And I do also do want to also mention that also on the fact of that is the part of the drones is, again, it's not going to be able to fix anything on the buildings too. So if the drone does actually find a problem, you're still going to need the scaffolding to actually get up there to do the problem later. But instead of having to do it on, all 3 sides of the building to go up and inspect it and take so much more time, you're centering on the issue and spending the appropriate money on exactly what needs to get done. And those workers still have to do that. So they're not out of the job just because of the drones. They still have to be able to be up there safely to get what's done. It's just the inspection method.
Okay, one follow-up question. Is there just transition language for, say, DOB inspectors that may lose jobs from drones and other technology being used versus humans going and doing this? Because I would love to see that New Yorkers that may lose a job from this get a job being a pilot or some other kind of support work for these drones to be used instead.
Well, no, saying just that there's so many more openings with drones, not even just through inspections, but there are so many purposes for drones. Again, I'm a production company, so I use it for photography, videography, but there's using it for art purposes, there's using it for inspection purposes, there's using it for police purposes. There are so many different ways to use drones, so that is always an option. I don't think anybody's going to necessarily lose jobs because of this. I think it's just going to make it a lot easier to get exactly where you need to know where the scaffolding is going to go, where it needs to be built, instead of just building it all over the place, keeping it over for a long time and then breaking it down and spending so much money and time on it. It's just more directed because you'll be able to see exactly where it goes and where the issues are. But I don't know any specific language that would say any of that. But
yeah, it's definitely a fair point. I'm not entirely sure if it's in the bill language at this point, but it's definitely something we're open to and would love to talk more about. As far as DOB jobs, I don't know that they are at a loss of things, folks to inspect and jobs to do. But it's definitely a great point and well taken, and we could definitely discuss.
There's no short. They're short inspectors and stuff. That's not an issue. They need people, and they're going to have to inspect it and pass it anyway.
No, I know, but I just want to be sure that while we move to new technology that can support our needs in other ways in the community, that we're just mitigating any unfortunate impacts that can happen when we change workforce needs and things like that. So that's why I wanted to flag it. Thank you for your feedback.
And again, it's also not the inspectors losing their jobs either, because they still need to be able to do the inspection. We're just getting the video and photography and the insights of them. It's still their job. We don't know physically anything of the capabilities of what the buildings hold. We still need their expertise to say and do all of that. So none of that is out of their job. That's still very much in their space.
Okay, next is Cos Spagnoletti. He's unmuted.
Already.
Take it away.
I assume these drones are what, inches or feet or yards away from the building?
They can be anywhere from inches to feet. Usually you want to, it's all about being smart, and again, keeping visual line of sight with the drone, knowing exactly how far and how close it is. But those, again, videos and photos that I showed earlier, again, were maybe a few feet from the building. And if I needed it closer, I could get closer. But again, being safe, knowing that, again, New York is a wind tunnel city where you have a lot of wind and everything like that, being safe, being able to pull back. But drones also have zoom to be able to get even closer, keeping that high quality. So that's not too much of a worry.
Okay, so let's say I'm 12 inches from a building.
Okay.
What airplane, what helicopter, what flights am I interfering with that I need a permit over 400 feet?
Well, at 400 feet in New York, I think you're still way under any building top. But to understand that, it would depend on the area. Again, understanding where the flight space is. And again, anywhere flying in New York or anywhere near airports, you still have to send in an application for the FAA to approve you to fly first. So they know what's going on. It has remote ID, so they know where everything is. And in the app, when we're flying, we know where helicopters are because we can see them on the map as well.
Now, my question is, I'm flying a drone 12 inches from a 800 foot building.
Hmm?
Am I interfering with any flights?
No.
So,
again,
the drone law was written at a time that it should be changed.
yes. And that's something that's continuously changing. Again, the New York law was written in 2017, and so much has changed. And the FAA is still working on changing and directing laws. 400 feet is the maximum right now, AGL, above ground level from where you take off. But when you're next to a building again, you can go as high as some of the buildings. But again, you're getting the authorization, you're understanding, you're showing where you are so the FAA knows and the pilots and everything can check in. When they have that, they have your phone numbers and all that, so you know where all the other things that are coming in are. They can reach you at any time. And you also still need to keep visual line of sight. So if you're on a building that high, you should be on a rooftop or something higher to be able to see this and everything around you. So for example, today, even though I'm in Boston, I was shooting a rooftop as they were installing a wind turbine on top of a residential building. I could see everything around me. So I saw helicopters that were going by in the distance. But it's, again, keeping that visual line of sight, seeing everything around me. It's part of the safety and part of the training that we have in getting your license, and something that everyone who is flying should know. And so you understand what's going on and you're not interfering with any flights. When think about that too, drones are on the lowest tier of any manned flight. So when it comes to it, it doesn't matter if there's an airplane, it doesn't matter if there's a helicopter, it doesn't matter if there's anything else. Drones have to move out of the way for airplanes, for helicopters. Every drone pilot knows that as well. So we are always getting out of the way. They come first, their flight comes first, and we always have lights on as well, especially in darkness or anything like that. That goes for 3 nautical miles to show and highlight where the drone is. So if any case that we were that high, we would have special lighting on there to make sure that pilots and airplanes and helicopters could see.
My next question is, Why do sheds go up years, months, years before any work starts? Then sometimes they go up, no work gets done for a year or two, and then they stay there with nothing being done.
I'll take this one. And it's a great question. It's one that you hear frequently. And it's because it can be super frustrating when you see the shed and nothing going on a property. The short answer is it's complicated, and there could be a large number of reasons why no work is visibly being done. Oftentimes it's about permitting. And one of the things that we're tackling in this plan is some of the permitting challenges. I'll start with my favorite one. I think this is actually the biggest difference that we could make in one day in sidewalk sheds in New York City. 30% of Manhattan is in historic district. If you are in a historic district, after a unsafe condition is identified, the property owner must put up a shed. They then must get a permit from LPC to do work. That could take months. Oftentimes in historic district could take up to 6 or 7 months before they go to DOB for a permit. DOB is pretty good, takes about 5 to 10 days, and then they could start work. And so because of that, you will have seen a project for just permitting, never mind any complication with access and materials, never mind a complication with financing, never mind a complication with a neighbor who might be saying, you can't put a shed on my property. That just the permitting alone could add 8 months onto a project.
But that's for emergency. We're talking local law 11.
That's for local law 11. Any building where there has been identified an unsafe condition, and unsafe condition is a facade with brick that's starting to crumble, right? Anything that could fall out of the building that's been inspected from local law 11 would then require for repair in historic district going to LPC first. The other thing I would mention is that, and we'll just stay in historic districts, if your building was built with terracotta, it is required by law that the terracotta be replaced 1 for 1. That means that the terracotta has to be taken off the building, and then it has to go to one of 2 manufacturers in the country. There's one in New York, there's one in California, where it gets analyzed, it gets designed, one piece will be shipped back to make sure it fits, and then has to go back again where they will manufacture all the terracotta that's needed. That entire process can take a year. That's a year when there's no actual work being done. There's a lot of back and forth and designs, and they're literally essentially X-raying or the equivalent of terracotta or clay. And that's because they're built in historic districts with a historic facade that means you have to replace it exactly that way.
Wow.
And these are all for local law 11. This is, 2 examples that can add between 8 and 18 months onto a project where you see nothing going on. If I'm happy to give you the whole list.
No, thank you.
Another time.
Thanks very well. Maybe we should get rid of bricks and put concrete panels up, and that would really get rid of it.
So the council members, one of the council members' bills and part of this plan includes changing the compliance cycle for buildings that are built with materials that are not terracotta, that are not. They shouldn't be, everything should be inspected, but they shouldn't be all treated the same way. Some materials are more prone to disintegration than others.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Judy Schneider. Can we unmute Judy? There she is. Go ahead.
Hi
Judy.
there. I don't know who gets to answer this question, but on your list that for the community board, item F, introduction 954, projects our city's green space, protects our city's green spaces by requiring scaffolding to avoid obstructing playgrounds and parks. Has anyone considered the bonus plazas? We have an issue right here in the East 60s where there's a bonus plaza that's been covered, which is really, it was made like a park, and it's been covered for over a year now, and I don't know how many more years it's going to be covered. and it's really a loss to the community. So would they think of Chris or whoever's here from Keith's office? I think that's Haley. Would they consider putting in the bonus plazas into that resolution?
Yeah, that's definitely a great question. That one is Councilmember Botcher's bill, and I'm not certain that that's included now, but it's a really good point, and I can definitely take that back to them and see what we can do there. Chris, I don't know if you have like additional context for that.
Only that there are countless examples across the city. This is a good one where we have been very aggressive as a city for putting sheds up. And so I think that overall, we're trying to achieve a city where there are more options to avoid the overshedding of New York City. And so I think that this is a great example and something we should talk about.
Thanks, Judy. Sherry Weiner, you mute Sherry.
Thank you, Chair. The excessive amount of scaffolding and sidewalk sheds has been a major issue for me. So when I saw that Councilmember Powers had introduced a packet of bills, I was thrilled, and I happened to see him at an event, and we spoke about it, and he said it would be very important to have the support of the community board. And then I spoke to Borough President Levine. He said he and the mayor were very much in favor of this. So it seemed like maybe this is the time that things would happen. So I really appreciate that Chuck and Craig jumped on this and put this presentation together. And I'd like to thank Hayden for his presentation. I met Hayden through a friend who has a building in Boston who they had a problem with the roof, and Hayden came in with his drones without putting up scaffolding to really inspect it and was able to solve their problem. So Hayden, thank you so much. This has been so informative. But Chuck, due to the fact that Councilman Powers would like us to pass a resolution at the appropriate time when people stop talking, I'm thinking of a generic, I don't want to go with all the, people don't like this, but let me just suggest something, a resolution to support the efforts of the city council to address the issues created by scaffolding and sidewalk sheds. Something in that vein where we're not going through each individual bill, but giving the council member the support he's looking for from, the major community board on the Upper East Side. So again, when you think it's appropriate, I would like to offer a resolution to that effect.
I guess I would ask, Haley and I don't know if Chris, from his vantage point, has, what kind of resolution they think is most helpful to them in their effort. And when we get to that, I'd like, or you can make a comment now if you want to.
Just something to, he's saying that he needs our support. So let's get the ball rolling. We can get the other community boards and let's get some. And I think a big issue is enforcement. I mean, all these rules look good and we have rules on the books, but I think it's a lack of enforcement. So certainly that put my 2 cents in how we need to enforce the rules. And I think using drones is a great idea. And again, Hayden, thanks so much. You really gave us a lot of information. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, well, we can get to when we get to that. Stephanie Reckler, next. Can we unmute Stephanie?
Thank you. I commend Councilmember Powers and Chris Carroll for the proposed legislation. There's certainly something that needs to be done. One of the reasons we are seeing all the bridges and scaffolding is that local law 11 is coming due for all the buildings at the same time. It's certainly a seller's market for construction companies. I'm president of the board of a building on Park Avenue, and the prices that are coming in are astronomical. The construction companies don't need more business. They have too much business all at once. And something needs to be done about that. We at the building have talked about trying to wait until next year to get more bids, because it's not like we're printing money in the basement, as we think some of these companies think we are. And as far as terracotta goes, yes, it's really very nice. And we understand that we have to replace our braiding with real terracotta before below the 6th floor. But there are only 2 companies that make the real terracotta. And I would like to see the fake terracotta and see how many of you all can tell the difference, because I bet you can't. And it's just a travesty to promote this. I mean, it's I would like to take it to Chris and Council Member Powers and see if they can tell the difference. Also, I really think that you should work on the permitting issues, because if it's going to take us 8 months to start the job, and we're paying for at least the bridge, it just doesn't make sense. If you want people to stay in New York City and to be able to afford the maintenance that will be increased because we're going to get a second mortgage, you have to make some accommodations. You know, not everybody just, can write a check for this. And I would appreciate it if you would take this under consideration. Thank you.
Stephanie, if you want to come with me on our fight against LPC issues, I am right there, and I will take you the entire way. I totally agree with you. We have some terracotta problems. I would also say, if anyone here wants to get into the terracotta business with me, there seems to be a lot of money to be made. So, if anyone's got an in on some clay anywhere, I'm ready. So.
Okay. Next is Jill McManus. Can we unmute Jill? Go ahead, Jill.
Hello. Oh, now you can hear me, right?
Right.
Sorry for the contact tag. Yes, this goes back to the drone presentation, which was very interesting. But I'm in a building that's had scaffolding for nearly 7 years. We've just gotten free of it about a year ago. Now the building directly in front of me is having pointing done. Not scaffolding up this high, but there are people on hoists going up and down. My question about the drones being so close are several. They're all about privacy. The drone going to come past a window where they're doing the pointing and come in, look in my window? And how would I be warned not to open my window and put my head out? And the other point is, that's privacy. The other point is, many of us here have terraces, and they may work down one strip of the building, but the terraces in the next line are still available for use. Only one drone allowed to operate in one block or one building at a time? And my next question is, does the drone pilot, is there a regulation, may not be carrying a cell phone? He would be distracted. Because I already don't feel that safe on my terrace, but it's been built strong, refurbished, but I don't want to be seeing drones coming past me.
Yes. So I'll answer was that all your questions? I didn't want to cut you off.
I think so.
Okay. So I'll try to get all of them. The first one you said privacy. The first aspect is no drone pilot is trying to look into any of your houses. Nobody doing that is caring about your internal, what you're doing in your house. There's no purpose in wanting to do that. As someone who does a lot of residential buildings personally, it's really not a problem because we're flying far away enough from the building where you're not looking in the windows. You're looking at the buildings, you're looking on the outside, you're looking at the bricking, you're looking at how the building is built and what it looks like on a smaller level. Now, what you can do on top of that is sometimes when I'm doing a specific home or a residential property, I have cards, I won't get into showing, but that I can leave in people's mailboxes or something like that saying, hey, I'm Hayden, I'm from Boston Drone Productions, and at this date, I'm going to be flying here. So if you want to, feel free to close your windows or do whatever. And that's something a property management in the building can do with working with the drone pilot to either get to put out there, or it's something that the building can let the group know. But again, the video and everything is not going to anywhere public. None of that video is going to be going online or anything like that. All of the video is going to the inspectors and it's going to the town. So nobody's going to be looking in your windows. They're going to be looking again on the outside and what's being built. The city the town or the building can put out something to say to all the visitors or all the homeowners to get that done and noted. And then again, the video is not going to be anything public. So you're not going to be shown on any of those videos at all. I have not had that problem once in doing a lot of inspections.
So you do not share your records with other agencies, if asked?
No, the records, when I do my inspections, I do it with the homeowner and they are able to share it with their inspector. If they want me to connect with the inspector, I may share directly with the inspector as well per their usage, but it's whoever the building is that I'm working with. So for example, the friend that Sherry was talking about, I worked with her. She was her and the president of the building hired me. I did all the photography and videography for looking at the building and the inspection. They then took the video afterwards that I sent them in the 4K, put all the videos together, took all the photos, sent her and her team all the photos and videos, and they were able to do whatever they wanted from there. It was not in
all right. So it would not be usable for a criminal investigation.
I mean,
not that I'm running a criminal operation.
I think if you happen to witness a murder, you might have to come forward.
Right. I mean, but I guess to answer that question,
okay.
I guess in that case, actually, with the person that I was doing that for, on the rooftop, they were actually building, unbeknownst to the rest of the tenants. It was the top tenant who was actually building up and building a whole rooftop without getting any permitting or anything like that. So I did get a lot of video for the president and for the association to say, hey, you're not supposed to do that. So I guess that did help them in that way. But again, that was something that they asked for, and that was very public and easy to see. But again, you can't see in any of the houses, you can't see in any of the windows. All the personal, private business is not to be known. So that there's no worry about that.
Can I jump in there really quick? I do want to acknowledge the issue. It's one we've heard before. It is a very real issue because once the city has information, it is unclear how that information gets shared from agency to agency. So, Hayden, I respectfully disagree a little bit. If DOB has footage of stuff and it happens to have captured something in a window, there is a concern for some folks, and we've heard this concern, that NYPD would be able to access that footage. It is something we're talking about. It is something that is going to have to be addressed. It's a concern we've heard, and so I do appreciate you raising it. It's real for sure.
Yeah, I think it is a real concern. And again, like you said, people don't like drones, and they're again always talked down upon usually. But the benefits, I think, definitely outweigh that. And again, they're not focused on you inside and personally. But again, I think with the communication with the building, being able to let your tenants know, to be able to, if you don't want anything being seen, to be able to close your window and give that warning ahead of time, a week or so in advance. I think there's very real catches for that to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, I think I understand this now, but I wonder if you also have one drone operator per block. I've got blocks here where every building is in scaffolding and or about to be in scaffolding. So
yeah, I think that, yeah, again, I think that totally depends on who's being hired and when that's being hired. Again, if it were me and my company, I could have me or multiple people underneath me doing it at the same time. But at the same time, it doesn't take very long. To go over a whole building may take 1 to 2 hours at maximum. So I could get a whole block of buildings done in 1 day or 2 days. And it, again, being only one person and one drone. But knowing that it, again, when you put in the authorization with the FAA, you're showing an area or a specific area to be focused on flying, and you can only stay within that area. And so when you're doing that, you know exactly where you're going to be flying, who's going to be flying, what's going to be flying at that time and in that area. If you had multiple people flying, it could work as well, but they would be separate apart. They would be communicating with each other if they were the same company, and understanding that. It's just like flying in Boston now. You could have multiple people flying at any time, but everyone has the authorizations. You can see it on your devices when you're flying, where potentially other pilots are. And there's also what they're working on, remote ID, to be able to see where other pilots are flying in that area too. And again, that doesn't show where they land and take off. The police have that information from the remote ID, but anybody else can only see when they're flying.
Okay, listen, Hayden, I think we have to move on a little bit here because
I hope I answered all of that.
Yeah, I think you have. And I wanted to ask Haley and Chris, what does Councilmember Powers and the Borough President think we need in the way of support? Obviously, we want to support you in this effort, and we do want to get a resolution. And I know Sherry wants to make a resolution more generally. I don't know whether you may want us to refer to the legislation in some way. And that's what I want to get your sense of it before we start throwing around resolutions here. Haley, you want to, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Chris, you probably have a better idea of what this resolution should actually say. I think, Councilmember Powers would greatly appreciate your support for the legislation specifically. But Chris, do you have sort of specifics on what this should look like?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Haley. And I really appreciate the question because the support is really important at this particular time. And there are two goals for us. There's the overarching plan that a lot of this legislation is sort of built out of. We are trying to demonstrate support to the city at large for that entire plan. We're also trying to demonstrate support within the council and the need for hearings within the council to each piece of legislation. And a resolution from the community board is going to help with both of those pieces. And so ideally, and you all will know far more what the board is comfortable with and what the committee is comfortable with. But a resolution that references the full plan and the need for the city to address each one of these pieces, as well as individual pieces of legislation, then has an audience of two different groups that are both exceptionally important to make these pieces happen. And so I think that's really, if we want to come down really hard and start moving the needle here, that'd be really great.
Good, thank you. Appreciate that. Sherry, you want to make a motion? We can talk about it if you make one.
A motion that we pass, or I wasn't sure. As I said, the one I had proposed was more generic, but you're saying you want us to address the packet of
Yeah,
bill.
I think they'd like to say we'd like to urge hearings on all this legislation. We think this legislation is, putting us in the right direction here and trying to solve this problem. I mean, I think we can make some generalized statements.
All right. Yeah.
I
Why
like
don't,
them.
yeah, that's fine. So I make a motion that we pass a resolution to support the efforts of the city council, urging hearings on the packet of bill being introduced by council member Powers.
And the need to address this issue of all of this excessive scaffolding, throughout the city.
Issue.
And we'll,
Yeah, we have to work. We'll work it out. But that's
right.
Yes, that's basically what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And I guess call for a second. I guess on that.
Yeah, is there a second? Does anybody want to second that? I see Lori does. Okay, and I see Michelle is very vigorously trying to be recognized. So go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, Chuck. I liked Sherry's original wording, and I just wanted to make a friendly amendment to that, saying, but when she says community board supports, looking into this, saying, but reserves the right to comment on individual bills when the time is appropriate and would like to be noticed on any public hearings. I don't think we can really vouch for each individual bill here today. I like Sherry's original concept of supporting the effort that the council member is making by bringing scaffolding into the public discussion. So I would support that part of it. I'm not sure how you change that, but definitely make part of the resolution that we reserve the opportunity to comment, on individual bills when the time comes. And also, and very specifically, would like to have ample notice of public hearings. Very often when we get notice of public hearings, it could be like a day before the hearing, if we get notice at all. So anyway, I don't know.
Well,
I'd like to know how Sherry feels about that, since it's her resolution.
Yeah, but let me just make a comment. I think we can say something about we'd like adequate notice of public hearings, but I think I obviously you have the right to make anybody's got the right to make comments on bills, but I personally think that takes away from, I think we need to support the concept, and we're not saying we're supporting every word of this legislation. I think what we're saying is this, the concept that these bills are trying to address is something that we support. And,
Chuck,
the problem that they're trying to address.
Well, let me just say this, Chuck. The resolution is as good as the words that are in it. So when you're talking about A through Y, so there are many, many, many bills here. And to my mind, we're supporting the concept that Keith is taking this issue on. That's what I'm supporting, because I am in disagreement with the first couple.
Look, I understand what you're saying. I think that's not something that moves the ball forward on this issue, frankly. But
well,
anyway,
it may, because they know that
we'll have a vote. We'll have a vote on what we want to do.
Well, we have to have a vote on the specific wording. That's why I'm asking about the wording.
Sherry talked about the wording.
Yes, but you changed it from her original proposal.
Well, she agreed to the changes.
Okay, well then you read it out and we'll see.
Okay, read it.
You're kidding. I don't have the, can't we
look, we can draft the resolution and we'll show it to Sherry and stuff. And I think we can do it in a way that gets the concepts that Sherry was talking about, but also does something to move the ball forward, because, council member Powers and the borough president would like some ammunition here. And we don't want to just be saying, yeah, this is a nice thought, a nice idea. We want to say, hey.
I'm uncomfortable writing specific language off the top of our head. I'd like, some time to think about it. I think the concept is clear enough that I'm comfortable, and I encourage the rest of the community board members to give, I don't know, Chuck and Craig the authority to, put together specific language.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I was just going to say that right now the language is generic enough. As I wrote it down, it was resolved. Community Board 8 supports efforts of the City Council urging hearings on the package of bills introduced by Powers, and urges that we address the issue of scaffoldings. And that's it. Or minor tweaks to that, but that to me just essentially says we want to move this issue forward without committing to any support or opposition to any one particular bill. And
we may want to. I'd like to reserve the right to strengthen that language a little bit without getting into the specifics of the bills, because as one who's been in place, who's worked in a legislature and worked for a United States senator and involved in drafting legislation and getting support for those kinds of things. Some things we want to help as much as we can. Reserving
bills. That's why we're doing this.
Right. Well, let's do. Why don't we draft something up, Sherry, and we'll pass it by you so that you're satisfied that it gets the concepts that you want and doesn't go too far.
Fine.
Okay.
All right.
Any other, Rita? Did you want to read it?
So.
Did you want to say anything, Rita?
Yes, I did. I apologize. I had computer trouble. I missed the presentation. I know what this is all about. I am in support of this. Did you want me to vote or not vote? Because I missed the presentation.
No, you can certainly vote. You can certainly.
Thank you.
Any other, are we ready to call the question on this? Any objection to that at this point? Okay. So all those in favor don't have to do anything. Is there anyone opposed, abstaining, or not voting for cause on this?
Let me just read the roll.
Yeah, why don't you read the roll? Yeah.
All right. It's myself, Chuck, Cause, John McClement, Judy, Lori, Michelle Mohit, Mrs. Brown, Peter, Rebecca Dangor, Rebecca Lamort, Rita, Sherry, Stephanie.
That's a pretty good group. Okay, so anyone raise their hand if they want to be against, abstaining, or not voting for cause. Michelle, do you?
Let me ask you a question, Chuck. I can abstain pending reading, the final resolution and change my vote at the full board, or I can support tonight. And if it doesn't say what I think it's going to say, then abstain at the full board. So which way do you think it's a better thing to do?
Support it tonight, and you'll see what happens.
And then we'll see what the wording is.
Correct.
Okay.
You always reserve the right.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you, Michelle. Yes.
Okay.
And I want to thank Councilmember Powers and Haley and also Chris Collins for your help and presentation, and also Hayden from Boston. We appreciate all your experience and thank you for joining in. It's very helpful, and I think this is a serious issue, and I hope we can move this thing forward and try to get some solution to these problems, which have been going on for a very long time here. As Chris stated, the over scaffolding of New York. So I think we're done, and we thank everybody. And again, Sherry, thank you for getting a hold of Hayden and getting him here. Okay. Item 2 is discussion of residential parking permit program. Craig, do you want to lead off on this one?
Sure. So unfortunately, it was, I believe, Valerie Mason who requested that we have this.
Right, she can't be here tonight, unfortunately.
She can't be here tonight, but this was added to the agenda in response to back in March when there was a proposal in the New York State Senate that has not moved forward with the budget resolution that was reached, but still may come back at some later point in time for all we know, that would introduce a residential parking program in New York City. Well, it actually wouldn't introduce it. It would allow the city to develop a program, because I guess this would require state authorization if it were to ever become a city program. So we figured, with this now on people's radar screens, and this is something that has also been discussed on occasion in the congestion pricing task force of Community Board 8, given that there is interest among some who live near the boundary of the congestion pricing zone at 60th Street, with among those who have concerns that people are going to inundate the area just north of the toll zone, where they would come and park and essentially just take the train or even walk over to the other side to avoid paying the toll, that would be a ideal location to have a residential parking program. So we've talked about it there in concept, though we've never expressed any support formally for that. But in terms of the policy in general, that's still more of a transportation committee item, which is why we thought it would be worthy to at least discuss just our general views on it, to see whether we want to take any action in regards to that concept, because at this point it is a concept. And I guess I'll just try to frame the discussion by just providing a little bit of context in terms of what can a residential parking permit program would entail. So there are other cities that have done it. I think many people here who have ever been to Boston are probably familiar with the fact that Boston has that program, and there are other cities that do also. And there are mixed feelings that don't necessarily fall along the traditional lines that you would expect when it comes to parking programs, because parking programs, they're obviously intended to provide benefits to local residents and prioritize parking opportunities for them. And at the same time, the potential downside of it is that there's never going to be enough inventory to satisfy everyone who may wish to have it. So it's not going to be a solution for everyone, and may still result in it's not going to essentially solve all of our parking issues that people feel like we potentially have in terms of the inventory of parking that exists. So that tends to be one of the debates that's been had, along with the fact that in the past, New York City DOT has been reluctant to move forward with anything related to this because they view this as administratively burdensome. Our current DOT commissioner has been on the record in the past of supporting a program, so maybe that's different now, but there have been issues raised in the past by other cities in terms of how difficult it actually is to implement. And then you have questions that have come up in terms of potential equity concerns and how you handle people who would have to park because, let's say, they work at a residential building, or they are a service worker, contractor, and whether that would create all sorts of, let's say, unintended consequences. So, and then there's the fact that there are some who believe that monetizing the curbside would actually be a good thing and could raise revenue for the city. There are others who would not support such a thing. So those are just a few of the issues that I'm just thinking top of mind, just to frame this discussion. So Chuck, I don't know if you want to add anything, but that's
no. The only thing I would say is the fact that Valerie's not here is sort of a little, and we do have some time. We may not want to get into a major discussion of this right now and put it on the agenda for our next meeting, maybe when Valerie can make it, because she has very difficult Michelle is saying thumbs up, and if people I'm happy to have people, if people want to comment. I know Andrew Fine and the public wants to comment, so maybe we'll hear from Andrew, but I think it might be better if we put it off till the next meeting, basically.
And that's fine with me. I just want to make sure that there's no one from the public who has been waiting around for this topic and is.
Well, Andrew wants to, I don't know if there's anybody else in the public. Andrew wants to.
Andrew, I know, has new business also, so he's here for another reason, at least.
Okay. But if he wants to comment on this, why don't we unmute Andrew?
Thanks, Chuck and Craig, and I agree with you. Valerie's not here. We could save this for another day. I guess I'll save my comments. I think that a pilot program could be endorsed. However, I think stopping congestion pricing in the first place would make such a pilot moot, so to speak. But I look forward to the new business portion of this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew. There's someone, it says iPhone, and if that's a member of the public, I'm assuming, if they can identify themselves.
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Boaz.
Oh, yes, of course. Of course. Welcome.
So I'm okay with talking about this next meeting. I don't know the details. The only ask is that I want you guys, in the next meeting, whenever you're raising it, explain how is it going to help to the majority of Upper East Side residents. They don't own a car. Is it going to help them or not? It's very important, to always think about those that don't own a car and, using public transit. Are we going to get something from it? Or will we be able to sell our parking? Who knows? I mean, just thinking out loud, but thank you.
Thank you both.
We appreciate those comments. And the answer I can tell you right now is we don't know, because this is all theoretical. And the impetus for this was a very generic proposal by the state to authorize the city to develop a program, but beyond that, there would be no details. So it's more conceptual, and we can talk about that more next month.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'll have any more insight at that point than I have now.
Okay, thanks, Boaz, as always. All right, Evelyn David, if we could be the last comment on this, though, because we're going to put this off. Evelyn, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Hi, it's Evelyn David. Yeah, no, I'm totally in favor of parking passes. The one thing for residents, okay, there was discussion before about license plates and licenses, and people had to be registered, in New York City. I started thinking about that. If you're a resident of this area, you live here, you vote here, you've lived here and voted here for, years and years, even not, you're considered a resident, period. And I don't think, if you wanted to say the car has to be registered in New York State, except there are a lot of people whose cars are registered in Florida that are around in this area, so I don't know where that discussion is going to go, but I just think you should be a little bit looser on, anyway, yes.
All right, thanks, Evelyn.
That's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on to the next item? And this was something that we got a letter in for our favorite 5G street pole attachment. And when it's located within 10 feet of an adjacent building, they have to send us a letter. We got this letter and we wanted to comment on it. We just wanted to bring it up to the committee. As everybody remembers, we passed a resolution against all of these things being located close to buildings because they could be, even though, they could be put further away from the buildings, and there's no reason to have them within 10 feet of anybody's window, frankly. But this is a specific location, and we had some location, we disapproved them all, but we had a general resolution disapproving it, and we thought that the committee ought to consider this resolution. And Michelle, do you want to make a motion here?
I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to make a motion to disapprove the placement of this 5G tower on 85th Street.
Okay, is there a second? Somebody, oh, there's Rita, second. Okay, can we vote? Anybody?
I mean, if it requires any background or information, I'm happy to provide some, but I think we went
Yeah.
into a lot of
Right,
detail
right.
about the health ramifications of this. And I see we have someone from the Environmental Health Trust on this, which I know who I know can speak eloquently about the health concerns of 5G. And there are many studies that have been done and many people that have been talking about this, and there's a lot of concern over the health. So the fact that we're getting them sort of willy-nilly anyway,
Right.
10 feet or more, I don't think we have to exacerbate the situation by now saying, oh, and now you can also do it closer than 10 feet.
Right,
You
right.
know, so I mean, I hope people support turning this down, but I would urge you to call on Odette Wilkins
Right, right.
and the Environmental Health Trust if she chooses to raise her hand. I don't want to put her
Yeah,
on the
she
spot.
has. She has raised her hand.
Okay, so I know Odette's hand is up, so please listen to her.
Yeah, and if we could just, I know Odette, you've spoken on behalf of this issue before here, so if you could just try to please be concise and if you can point to comments you've made in the past, and we could include that in our resolution as well.
And Odette has been working very assiduously on this whole subject with a lot of people.
Are we going straight to Odette?
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much for having me again. There's a couple of issues, and these are legal issues. I don't know if you know about the FCC letter that was sent to City Bridge, basically stating that they violated two federal laws, the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. And they were supposed to have engaged in reviews under those two laws for every single tower that they were constructing. Now, the letter from Garnet Hanley from the FCC also states that this doesn't just apply to towers, it applies to each antenna.
Uh-huh.
So, and I also want you to know that that is from the 2019 decision against the FCC, which the FCC lost. And it was ruled by the federal appellate court, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. And they said that the FCC's effort to provide a categorical exemption for all 5G small cell deployment was arbitrary and capricious. And the court struck down that rule and said that all 5G small cells are subject to environmental review. And that includes this 5G small cell that they are trying to put on 85th Street. And that actually applies to every single small cell that has been placed in New York City. And what I would love to see is for Congressman Nadler to send another letter to the FCC, in addition to the one that he already sent regarding the National Historical Preservation Act, to call for a NEPA review, National Environmental Policy Review, for each of the small cells. So that is the problem with the small cells.
Good, thank you, Odette. And hopefully, I just happened to be in a meeting with him on something completely different today, but that's something we can relay on to him. Okay, Jill McManus, I believe, want to be heard on this. Jill, go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. I wanted to add a specific, I don't know whether you were informed at the community board, new pole on 85th Street, just east of First Avenue. I just noticed it in the last month or so. Of it being there before. I know there's one on 83rd, closer to Second Avenue subway. And
yeah, right. These are the standalone things as opposed to the ones that are on the existing, light poles and stuff.
Standalone, but are you aware? Were you warned about it? It's quite close.
Yeah.
To the building.
Yes. They sent us. They did send us a letter about. They dropped off some of them, but those are still on the list. Yeah.
Can we disapprove those as well?
We did already.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Costs?
Call the question.
Okay. Any objection? Okay.
All right,
All those, if anyone's in favor, you don't have to do anything. Anyone opposed, abstaining, or not voting for cause? Raise their hand.
let me just read the roll quickly.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Craig, Chuck, Cos, John McClement, Judy, Lori, Michelle, Mohit, Mrs. Brown, Peter, Rebecca Dangor, Rita, Sherry, Stephanie.
Okay. Seeing no hands raised, that's unanimous disapproval. It sounds like there's a lot more legal impediments that are going to be put in place here. And Odette's been following this and leading the effort in a very effective way so far. And I think we appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if Colleen is here if she's got any updates from the DOT. Yes.
Hi, Chuck. Hi, Craig. Hi, everyone.
You.
It's Colleen. It's Colleen Chattergoon from DOT. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I have good news, and I want to thank Will for helping me put together a list. We are planning to have a walkthrough on the York Avenue study, and I'm going to get back to the community board with a few dates. Will help me put together a list of stakeholders that should join us at this walkthrough. And I will share that with the committee once everything is finalized. But we haven't forgotten the York Avenue study. I want you to know it's on our radar. We think that it's important to have this walkthrough so we can identify some of the critical corridors that, we may not have information and that the community is very familiar with the traffic congestion or other safety issues along the corridor. So I just wanted to let you know that that's in the pipeline and we're working on that. I will get back with Will on a few dates and he'll check in with you guys and let me know what works for you. Okay.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Good. I guess we may have some questions for Colleen. Costs, you want?
Sure.
Costs, you have questions or statements or?
Yeah, I'm just wondering from Colleen what the status of the illegal sidewalk structures is.
Well, you've never asked that before.
No, never. I've never. I'm just
except at every meeting.
I'm just trying to get an answer.
Too much. Because we continue to inspect the structures that are deemed to be non-compliant. And I tell this to the community board always that if you know of a structure that is non-compliant, please email me or send it to Will, the name of the restaurant and the location, and we'll have an inspector go out there. We also have our database that we can go in and we can check to see whether, inspections have been done and what, notices were issued to the restaurant owner. So again, please let us know the locations along with the addresses, and we'll be more than happy to send inspectors to the site.
But at the same time, I think 2-3 years ago, I sent in a couple of addresses. Those structures are still there on the sidewalk. So what's going on?
They're probably their cause because they are in compliance or that they
No. Any new structure on the sidewalk is illegal. As per DOT recommendations post pandemic.
I think what it is causes that you have to keep in mind that restaurants owners can still apply under the program. It's a self-certified program. And when they do, we will, we go out there, we inspect the locations. If they're not in compliance or if they have built a structure on the sidewalk, they would have to remove it.
But I know of one that is still, actually two that are still there that I reported.
Okay, if you can just email me the 2 locations, I will check on those, or email it to Will and I'll look into it. Because I can't, you mentioned it was like 2 years ago, so I can't recall the locations.
Is this coming to fruition at all? Any final resolution on the sidewalk and the street?
So we are continuing to work on the permanent program, which we will come back to the community board. But under the permanent program, you will not have structures that are going to be built on the sidewalk or in the curb lane. It's going to be different. The permanent program is going to be, the layout is going to be very different.
Oh, when do we expect that? Tomorrow?
I don't know what the timeline is yet, but again, once I have that information, I'll share that with the community board. And again, we will come to each community boards in Manhattan and give a presentation on it.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome,
I thought I read somewhere where they're getting very close to coming up with some draft regulations for the permanent program. And we were, as Colleen said, I mean, we were told that before, once they have some kind of a draft, they're going to make a presentation to us here.
That's correct, Chuck. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Michelle, do you have a question for Colleen?
Yeah, I have two actually. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
First, with reference to York Avenue, when you talk about the stakeholders, I'm assuming that you're having the hospitals actually participate and their representatives. Yeah,
correct.
Because
correct.
over the many years, there's always been a little hovering about making York Avenue one way as one of these solutions. I mean, I'm hoping that would never be the case, because I can foresee the nightmare of that as a directed traffic going to the hospital, having to go up first and come around. Anyway, the hospitals would know better about that, but I want them, to be involved. And are the stakeholders institutions? Who are you calling the stakeholders?
They are institutions. Again, Will provided me with a thorough list, and I'll be more than happy to share that list with you, Michelle.
Okay, so you don't know when that's going out for a walk, and it'll be shared with us far in advance of that?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, that's good. Now, with reference to the open restaurants, I think the reason there's so much confusion is because in the paperwork that the DOT has put out, in one draft, it said what you just said, that there will be no sheds, that you will allow to have tables and chairs on the sidewalk, not on a wood platform, but perhaps a 3-sided, 36-inch high, 3-sided, wall to different, perhaps, and none in the roadbed, I'm hoping. However, there was other paperwork put out where there were people were designing sheds, and where restaurants are still constructing them. Now, these things cost a lot of money. If they got a heads up on your thought that they're not going to be permitted, why are they still constructing?
So, Michelle, I'm not aware of, the design aspects of what you mentioned, the two design aspects, because we haven't put out anything yet.
It was in the original paper.
I don't know what was in the original paper, Michelle, because we have not put out anything. What was put out was under the emergency program, and that was modified as we went along with the program. Okay. In terms of restaurant owners who are building structures, who continue to build structures, we have mentioned to them that under the new program that it's going to be different. If they choose to build it, then that's their prerogative, but we can't tell them not to build in the interim, because we don't know yet, or at least I don't know yet what the timeline is of when we're going to come back to the community board. But I'm assuming that it's going to be fairly soon.
But then it would be the city's financial responsibility to remove them. In other words, if people are building them and they're going to end up being against the law, and then they say, well, I just put a lot of money into it, I don't want to have the expense of removal, and then the shed is abandoned because it can't be used, then it rests with the city to remove it. It seems to me that there should be a little more stringent enforcement on those that are putting them up illegally. Save everybody a lot of money.
I will take that back, and I will see what the team thought is about that, because I know we have been communicating that with restaurant owners.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Andrew, fine. Can we unmute Andrew? Go ahead.
Thanks, Chuck. It's a question for Colleen, because she mentioned community input coming to the community board. DOT came to the community board and asked what the community board felt about Truck It. And the community board came back, I think it was 43-0, correct me if I'm wrong, and said, we don't want Truck It. And I'd just like to understand the rationale by DOT of completely ignoring a shutout 43-0 vote by the community board and saying, truck it, we're just going to do it.
I don't understand. I mean, with what? What do you, is it with the outdoor dining or?
No, not the outdoor. No. These were
the car share pickup.
The car share pickup trucks
and the $287 spots that you're providing annually for rental pickup trucks that the community board, not unanimously, but 43-0 rejected. But DOT just said, truck it.
So Andrew, with the car share and with the location,
I'm not cursing. It's like that's the name of their program. Truck it.
We decided to move forward with that, and I think what we mentioned to the community board is that if there's any problems with the locations, we will continue to monitor them and see what improvements we can make. I think with this program is that we feel confident that it's going to be successful or that it will be successful. And I know that the community was not in favor of it, but again, we think that it's a great program and we'd like to move forward with it. And we will monitor it. And if I will, take this back to my colleague and I will ask them if there are plans to come back to the community board to give an update, which I'm sure we're going to do that any which way to see how successful it's working out or not.
Got it. So in terms of we means the DOT, not we, the community.
Correct. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part.
That's it. No, it's just that when you say we means the DOT and not we, the community, because the community is clearly against it.
I understand the community is clearly against it, but again, we feel, DOT, the agency feels that it's a good program and we would like to move forward with it. And,
so the DOT feels that their opinion overrides the overwhelming majority, or not even majority, nearly unanimous community input. The input's completely neglected.
I wouldn't say that the input's completely neglected. We do consider and take into consideration the community board's input in a lot of issues of concerns. And again, this is one particular area where we feel, or the agency feels, that the car share program is a good program and we want to move forward with it.
Got it. So DOT feels that they override the community. That's all I have. Thank you.
Andrew, we do have this issue that comes up from time to time. And obviously we're advisory. And I think DOT does work with us in a lot of situations where they do take our advice and modify things. And then there are some programs where they just feel this is something that the city wants to move ahead on, and regardless of what we think about it, they're going to do it. And this was one of those programs. And as you were saying, where they just said, truck it, and we're moving ahead. Okay. Any,
I have one announcement to make, actually.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sure.
So for those of you who may not have heard, I know we've spoken in the past and we spoke about it more in depth in March when we were talking about the Roosevelt Island F-train disruptions, 63rd Street tunnel disruptions that have been delayed and are not occurring starting essentially a few days ago as they were supposed to. But we were discussing the issue of Omni not being implemented as of yet on the Roosevelt Island tram. And the good news is that the MTA announced at their board meetings last week that they have been moving forward with Omni implementation and working with their affiliates, and that Roosevelt Island is slated to have Omni implemented on the tram by the end of the third quarter of this year. So that is definitely progress and good news, and hopefully they will be able to meet that deadline that they announced, and that Roosevelt Islanders will have access to it on the tram, in addition to the subway where they already have it.
Yeah, that was good news. I think that's what the Roosevelt Island people wanted, and they actually got it done. It looks like. Maggie Lehman, I guess, wanted to raise any issue. Can we unmute?
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Just very quickly, I'd like to add my voice briefly, Colleen, to add to, I think it was Andrew, but I'm not sure who was making the comment on behalf of the public or the community board on the car share program. I think what you're hearing is not only disappointment on the part of the community board as representing the public, but also extreme disappointment not even to tinker with the car share program a little bit. I'm specifically referring to the inclusion of the trucks. And so to not even modify somewhat purely from a standpoint of safety, to at least remove from the car share program the inclusion of trucks being parked there, trucks therefore being available for anyone to rent the trucks, regardless of what experience there had been in driving the trucks at all historically, I think is worth noting again and repeating it. I think these are accidents waiting to happen, and I really felt important to speak on behalf of our community board and on behalf of the many, many members of the public who specifically referenced the trucks. Chuck, thank you for letting me speak.
Oh, sure, of course. Any further old business or new business that anyone wants to raise while we're at it? Andrew? Go ahead. There you go.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you for indulging me. And excuse me for my reading glasses. This is kind of a first, but I've got to go there eventually. Just 2 points. First is, I just like to mention, and I think the community board should consider the proliferation of e-bikes and e-scooters, e-mopeds, all these e-vehicles. All mopeds that run at 20 miles per hour are considered Class C, and they need to be licensed and insured and have registration and so forth. And all mopeds that run to 30 miles an hour are Class B, and these also must be registered, licensed, insured. E-bikes and scooters that are Class 2 and Class 3, they can go the same speeds, 20 miles an hour, 25, 30 miles an hour. Some of them are the same exact weight and can do the same exact damage. I think that the community board should consider some sort of resolution to have all e-bikes, there's 65,000 that are being run around by delivery workers with the lithium ion batteries, et cetera, disregarding all traffic laws and having absolute impunity. I think the community board should consider a resolution to have these vehicles, because they are vehicles and they can kill people and they disobey traffic laws, that they should be registered, licensed, and insured, so that when the time comes, unfortunately, that people become disabled or killed by these vehicles, that there is some sort of accountability. That's point number one. Point number two, and this is really, this struck me as very odd, because I've had a lot of complaints from people on Lexington Avenue about the amount of garbage that's on the streets, not on the sidewalks per se, that's a problem, but also on the streets. And I came to notice that sometime during the pandemic between 2019 and 2021, alternate side parking on Lexington Avenue throughout the entire East 80s disappeared. The regulations changed from all the way up until 2019. And I have the Google Wayback Machine, which 2020 was obviously a pandemic year. They didn't take pictures of Lexington Avenue. But in 2019, Lexington Avenue between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. was no standing anytime. And street sweepers were able to access the curb, sweep it up, and clean Lexington Avenue. Starting in 2021, or sometime between 2019 and 2021, all of a sudden, everything on Lexington Avenue became commercial only parking from 7 a.m. until 10 a.m. And now there is no longer any window whatsoever where parking is not allowed on Lexington Avenue. So street sweepers are no longer accessing the curb at any time. And I stood out to observe street sweepers on Lexington Avenue between 7 and 10 a.m. the other day. And guess what? There are trucks parked in the parking spots. There are trucks double parked, and the sweeper goes right down the only lane of Lexington Avenue that's accessible really to anyone. This is totally perplexing. And if you look at the curbs in the East 80s, they're filthy. And it's inexplicable to me. And maybe somebody can explain this. I understand that we're trying to make room for commercial parking, truck unloading, et cetera, but there's got to be an hour of the day, 1 hour out of 24, when street sweepers can access the curb and clean it up. What do you think, Chuck?
No, I think actually both your points are well taken. I
can take my glasses off now.
I was just I was walking to the 2nd Avenue subway today, and I noticed as I was getting there to 2nd Avenue, I wanted to cross over, that these e-bikes were flying in the bike lane. Now there is a bike lane, but they were flying so fast, then you wonder, if that's a danger. And so I think we ought to look at the e-bikes and e-scooters. And interestingly enough, I live on 3rd Avenue. 3rd Avenue does have periods where they do say no, the street sweeping, basically like an hour.
Half an hour.
Right, or whatever it is, yeah. And maybe Colleen can address that, because I think that's something that we ought to also look at for what you're talking about. And I know what Lexington Avenue is different. I do know that too. And we ought to look at that in the 80s too.
Colleen's really filthy.
Yeah, go ahead. Craig, you want to say something?
Yes, I could just provide a little history here. The changes to the parking regulations were done in conjunction with the Lexington Avenue bus lane implementation. So when that presentation was provided, they did indicate the proposed changes to the curbside regulations to provide the additional loading zones. I don't see anything in here on whether there is cleaning, or if anyone recognized at that point that would be an issue, that we would not have any time in which streets would be able to be swept. I know that we also have talked about this, and I made a request back a number of years ago for DOT to identify any streets. This was especially the case in the low 60s on some of the cross streets, because we had a number of constituents that brought up streets that were not being cleaned, because on those streets, just like here, the loading zones sort of took over the time that was previously alternate side parking, or actually maybe it was that we were considering alternate side parking changes, and one of the justifications was the lack of the fact that we had loading zones in place that didn't allow for street sweepers. So I think we're seeing this here also, and it's an issue that I think we recognize needs to be addressed. So Andrew, thank you for bringing that up. And I would say that I know, Colleen, you're on. I don't know if we should just go back and pull up the requests that we made in the past, but I think we should certainly again try to move that forward and identify any streets in which we don't have any alternate side parking regulations in place, even for a half hour, to allow for sweeping.
Cleaning. Yeah.
And between 7 and 8 a.m., there are very few trucks that are utilizing the commercial only, and unfortunately, the street sweepers still have difficulty navigating. The explanation that Department of Sanitation gave me is that there's no specific time that they can sweep, but they'll just kind of weave in and out where they can. If you just prohibited from 7 to 8 a.m. or 7 to 7:30 and got the sweepers in there, it would make a huge difference to sanitation in the area.
And that's what they have on the other avenues, where they have a half hour allocated, I believe, 4 days a week generally.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. thank you for looking into it, and maybe they can make a difference.
Yeah, but we'll pursue those both of those actually. Any further business that anyone wants to raise?
Colleen, are you still on by chance?
She was, yes, she is still here.
I see her camera's off and muted. Okay.
Yeah, hi, Craig, I'm still here, yes.
Hi, I just wanted to bring up, I know that Michelle, if you could, we can unmute Michelle, that you wanted to ask Colleen about summer streets.
Yes, I actually wrote, well, it was summer streets. I actually wrote to her about summer streets. And I didn't get a response, so I'm happy to repeat it today. But in the past, the DOT had come to us with a list of the summer streets so that we could comment on them. Last year, as you know, I walked out my front door and I saw the summer street sign that I think started, I couldn't walk the whole distance, but my understanding it was from somewhere, it was south of 57 and it went all the way up to like 119th Street or higher. Colleen knows the exact streets, and it was much to my dismay. There were bikers on the street, but not that many. But the closure of all that street, those streets, was a major inconvenience to the residents here because thousands of people live in this area. If you just take, say, Park from 79th to 86, there are like 1,500 people that live there. There are elderly, and this is up and down the avenue because it's all the way up and it's all the way down. So when you walk out, first of all, everybody had to move their parked cars, which we know there are people who hate cars, but they are a reality and there is parking and people do take advantage of that. But in addition, anybody who is coming out of any of these buildings, and there are many elderly, but not that they are, and disabled, but not that that's the only, those are the only categories, but they could not get their deliveries. They could not come out and get an accessoride. They couldn't get a taxi. They had to walk around the block. Now these blocks are long, not easy if you're having luggage, if you have to go to the airport. You're putting bike lanes all over the city. It seems to me perfectly appropriate for people who want to ride their bike, to ride in the bike lanes, even recreationally, or ride in the park and all of the areas that are being arranged for them. And mind you, you're not asking anything of them in return. They pay no money for licensing, they pay no money for using the streets, but the whole city is there for them. So to close this major residential area for their use, I think is just completely inappropriate. I know who's whispering in your ear down at the DOT, but you've got to let some of us other people whisper in your ear. And I urge you not to use Park Avenue again this year for your open streets, and any other people, they may have, there are other streets where people want to comment on them. I don't have personal experience with all of them. I think the concept is not a terrific one. I'm not happy for our city streets to be a playground. I mean, that's why we have recreational areas and we have the promenade and we have the park and we have all that. But there are people who need the street. There are doctors' offices, all kinds of services that did not have access because of the open streets on this avenue, which is loaded with doctors' offices and the elderly, etc. So I made my point. I think you understand. As you told us in the last topic that Andrew brought up, the DOT likes it. So, but I'm asking the DOT to please take this under consideration. I'd appreciate it. And any of your open streets should come before the appropriate community board each year. Thank you.
I thought, Michelle, that you were just going to ask Colleen to make sure that that the summer streets be announced with enough time for feedback. That's
what I thought too.
Sorry, you're muted, Michelle.
Yeah.
I think I did ask that question, but it came out of the surprise of the whole Park Avenue situation. You have like, I don't know, however many miles or more, maybe 8 miles of roadway that was closed and without any notice to anybody. So when that came to my attention, I more broadly stated everything should come to us before you close streets like that, including the open streets. You know, the general program of open streets, but we won't get into that now.
Michelle, it's Colleen. In defense of the Open Street program, I did respond to you and I mentioned to you that the reason why the corridor was expanded is because lots of folks reach out to the DOT and they ask for the corridor to be expanded. It's ironic that, you know, you mentioned that the DOT has come in the past and presented on open streets to the community board. I know when the program initially kicked off, we did do that, but we have not come to the community boards to give any recent presentations on open streets. You know, other community boards are asking for us to expand the routes and, you know, which is something that, you know, we are carefully reviewing. And in terms of outreach, we did do our outreach. We did meet with stakeholders and we informed them of the expansion. So it's not that we just decided to close these streets off and not, you know, give the community a heads up. We did.
Just let me respond, Colleen. When you responded to me about my email, that was last year, and that's correct. But I sent you another, I have not heard back. But that having been said, let's put that aside. When you told me that stakeholders had asked for this, I asked you, I said, which buildings in this corridor actually asked for a closed avenue? Well, you told me you weren't at liberty to say. So there's some privacy concerns here, but I can tell you that the bulk of the avenue did not call DOT and beg for it to be closed. When you refer to stakeholders, you're not talking about people like me. You're talking about bike riders and other people and their organizations who petition the DOT regularly for more and more of a piece of our public streets. You're not talking about me or people like me. So,
Michelle, I will definitely find out if we had any complaints about the expansion because I know my office has not, but I will check with my colleagues to see if anyone raised any issues.
You have from me, and there are many people. 311. I just want to say that 311 isn't the only outlet for people. There are people who are out and they're living their lives and they don't call 311 every time they're upset about something. If you're trying to get to the airport and you don't get a cab, you don't stop and call 311 to say that you were annoyed. So that reporting is not the be all or end all. But I don't think that this program is needed up and down like 8 miles of streets to accommodate this group. And I would others feel differently. I recognize that. But there are some voices that are way louder than others. And I'm asking that they be considered equally, that all voices be considered, not just one point of view.
I agree, Michelle, that not everyone calls 311, but most people do call their community boards and their elected officials.
Let's not belabor this point. The fact is there are a lot of people involved in this, and it's I've read plenty of stories where people love this, so it's all in the eye of the beholder here. So I think that's not something we're going to solve here tonight. But let's see if there's any further. We got a couple more people here who would like to be heard. Boaz.
Just a short comment about the open street. I support Michelle. I think that every open street should come to the community board, but absolutely, I love the open street program. Okay. I love it and I will support it, but I think that everything that the city can that impact the community should be brought to the community. And I agree with Michelle that we should all have our voice heard. Michelle knows that, for example, market rate people are not, their voice is not very strong in the community board. But yeah, it's a problem. 50% of solving the problem is knowing there is a problem. We need to get it fixed, but I 100% support the open street. And yeah, but I support Michelle holistic approach that everything should come to the community board. Thank you.
Boaz, we're talking
Okay,
about the
but-
summer streets, which happen every
Summer
August and
Street.
3.
I agree.
Yeah,
Summer
he
Street.
meant Summer Streets, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Spoken like a true politician, Boaz. Okay. Lori?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second to that? Okay, Rita. Any objections here to that? All in favor, I should say. Okay. I think we are adjourned, and I thank everyone. Good meeting, and we will see everyone or most of you at the full board meeting.